This is Story Recapped. Today, I'm going to explain a drama, mystery, and sci-fi film called The Door. Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. An artist named David Andernach is busy painting in his studio. His daughter, Leonie, invites him to catch butterflies with her. However, David heads out and promises that he'll play with her later. Alone, Leonie chases after butterflies. Meanwhile, David visits a neighbor, Gia, who's annoyed that he hasn't visited in a while. David excuses that he's been preparing for his exhibit. The two have been having an affair, but David doesn't consider their relationship serious. Gia is angered by his comments, but the two still end up getting intimate. During this, David accidentally drops his phone. When David returns home, Leonie is nowhere in sight. He notices the backyard door open, and his instincts kick in. David rushes out and jumps into the pool, where Leonie has drowned. 5 years later, a drunk David knocks on his ex-wife's door only to be pushed off by her new lover, Edgar. His ex-wife, Maya, sarcastically says that she forgives him for letting their daughter die while he slept with the neighbor, which further sends him into despair. Maya tells him to disappear from her life before leaving. Later, David leaves a voicemail for Maya promising that he'll no longer visit or call her. He ends the call with an apology. Just as Maya is about to pick up the phone, Leonie's voice continues to haunt David. He returns to their old home and visits the pool where she died. Succumbing to his guilt, David drops into the pool. As he sinks, he sees a vision of a beach with his daughter running towards him. David smiles as his daughter runs into his arms. David wakes up, coughing up water. His friend Max pulled him out after Maya called him, saying that she was worried about David. Max takes him to a bar and orders him to stay at his house for the night so that he can keep watch of him. As Max talks about his sons, David zones out and hallucinates Leonie in the mirror. He then excuses himself to the bathroom where he jumps out from the window. David walks back to his old house but slips on ice. While on the ground, he finds a dead butterfly on the snow and puts it in his palm. Suddenly, the butterfly returns to life and flies away. David follows the butterfly into a narrow tunnel that leads to a door with sunlight pouring in from the gaps. David opens the door, and to his surprise he finds himself in the same field, but it's a sunny morning. From afar he sees himself heading to Gia's house. Confused, David walks to his old home and recognizes this as the day that his daughter died. Just then, Leonie trips near the pool, hits her head and falls into the water. David turns to save his daughter, but gets hit by a truck. Still, David limps to the backyard and jumps into the pool. He releases her shoelace that gets stuck on the drain and successfully brings her back to the surface. David holds on to his daughter, relieved that she's safe. As Leonie sleeps, David watches her lovingly with tears in his eyes. He then prepares to leave just as the phone rings. David heads back and rejects the call while the other David walks inside. The younger David finds him and carefully walks towards him, believing that he's a burglar. David catches a glimpse of the other David just before he hits him on the head. David stabs the other one in the neck with a pencil in defense. The younger David dies, smearing his blood on the floor. Leonie suddenly calls him from the top of the stairs. In distraught, David yells for her to return to her room. Then, David quickly cleans up the scene and removes the body. The phone rings again just as he finishes, and David picks it up. On the other end, Maya tells him that she'll come home late. Later, David drags the body into the backyard where he buries the body in a shallow grave. When he returns home, Leonie looks at him suspiciously. David inspects his wound from the truck accident and cleans himself up. He dyes his hair and burns his clothes, making sure that he looks exactly like his younger self. Maya finally arrives home and David watches her arranging the groceries in the kitchen. When she notices that he's staring at her, she checks if he's okay and he says that he is. Maya then announces that they have a guest coming over. To David's surprise, it's Max. During dinner, Leonie is wary of David. Maya and Max joke about how they're living under David's shadow due to his success. Suddenly, Maya notices Leonie's wound on her head, and David defends that she just fell from her bike. When Max suggests that her father buy her a helmet, Leonie claims that David isn't her father. David tries to comfort his daughter, but she jumps and runs off. Horrified, Maya chases after Leonie. Maya checks on her daughter in her bedroom, but Leonie refuses to talk. Maya then advises her not to say such things even if she's mad at her father. After listening to them, David goes to his studio to see his artwork, depicting Maya and Leonie with hooks on their mouths. Maya walks in, curious about the painting. David then apologizes, claiming that Leonie is mad at him because he yelled at her when she tripped. Maya believes that Leonie can tell that they're struggling as a couple since David cheated on her before. She then asks him for an old friend's number for her to invite to his birthday party, but David realizes that he doesn't have his old phone with him. Later, he digs up the grave to retrieve the phone from the body, but it's not there. Suddenly, his neighbor, Siggy, greets him and tosses him a beer. David freezes, making sure that the fences keep him out of Siggy's sight. When he gets to bed, he relishes being back in his home with his wife. yet he can't sleep. Maya prepares for David's birthday party the next day, but David still hasn't found his phone. Maya calls the phone, hoping to hear it ringing in the house. Instead, Gia picks up, and Maya hands David the phone, already suspicious of him. Gia teases David to come over to pick it up. David heads out and drives his car, pretending to pick up his phone elsewhere. He parks his car out of sight, then goes to Gia. She hands him the phone, but she tries to get intimate with him. When he refuses, she threatens to tell Maya about their relationship. Still, he refuses her. When David heads out, he sees Leonie hugging Max as he gave her a present. Max spots David ducking out of Gia's house, so he directs the girls to head inside. Later, Max scolds David about the affair. David insists that he's not cheating on Maya, and to convince Max, he decides to tell him the truth. He reveals that he's David from 5 years in the future. He entered a tunnel that brought him back to the past where he saved Leonie. Max asks where the other David is, and he confesses that he buried him. Max, however, is angered that he's making up stories. David then reveals Max's future with his wife and sons and the eventual success of his career. When David tells Max what his future sons' names will be, Max tears up and leaves. The next day, David attends Leonie's music rehearsal. After the class, Leonie hurriedly gives David her things and leaves without a word. Edgar, Leonie's music teacher, greets him, but David treats him coldly. Leonie walks home without looking at her father. When David asks about Edgar, Leonie claims to hate the music lessons. He makes a deal that'll get her out of the music lessons if she hugs him. Leonie hugs him quickly, then steps away, stressing that he only asked for one hug. At home, David and his family spend time with their neighbors, Suzanne, Paul, and Nellie. When Leonie's toy airplane lands on the other David's grave, she notices that it sinks in the area. David explains that a mole might have defecated there. Leonie continues to be cold towards him but slowly warms up to him again when he plays with her. After the girls leave, David steps on the corpse's hand that's popping out of the soil. Later, David and Maya share a smoke. Maya wonders if the painting depicts how he really sees her and their daughter, and David assures her that it's not. David leans for a kiss, but Maya hesitates as she's still learning to trust him again. One afternoon, David approaches Leonie as she finally asks him what he did to her real father, revealing that she saw the blood. David lies that her father just had a nosebleed back then, and is now far away. David claims that he's an angel, who was sent to trade places with her father because he couldn't do his job of caring for her. He promises to try to be a better father than the other David. While driving home, Maya spots a couple that looks like Suzanne and Paul. When she checks on them again, they're gone. That evening, David returns Leonie's missing stuffed toy. For the first time, she calls him Daddy. Once Leonie is asleep, David attempts to rekindle his relationship with Maya. This leads to them spending an intimate evening in bed. Everything seems to be going well for the family during David's birthday party. Suddenly, he spots Leonie drawing on the dining table, and Max sees something that seems to upset him. David goes to check what's happening, but Maya collects him to talk to some guests. When he returns, Leonie has left her drawing of him carrying the other David's body on the lawn. From the window, he spots Max searching for the body. It starts to rain when David finds him kneeling before the corpse of the old David. David tells Max that it was an accident, but Max is still in disbelief. He tries to head back to the party, but David stops him. The two get into a scuffle, and Siggy suddenly appears, stabbing Max in the head with a pickaxe. Siggy hurries David to hide the body before his family notices. Siggy helps David move Max's body to the woods, where David buries him. Siggy insists that it was the only way to keep Max from betraying him. On their way back, David notices an odd-looking Gia driving past them. Once Siggy leaves, David mourns for his friend in the car. With the party still ongoing, David sneaks into the laundry room and cleans himself up. He then searches for Maya and tells her that they're in danger. With Leonie asleep in his arms, David and Maya rush to the tunnel. David directs him to go inside and leads him to the door on the other side. David heads forward, not noticing that Maya and Leonie stop following him. He checks the door on the other end and sees that it's snowing on the other side. When he notices that Maya and Leonie are gone, he runs back out, where Siggy hits him in the head with a gun. Siggy threatens him not to go back in time anymore. The following day, David contemplates what to do while watching his wife and daughter sleeping. Later, Maya confronts him about the previous night. David claims that Max led him away from the party to smoke a joint. He acts as if he can't remember what happened, but Maya doesn't buy it. She asks about the tunnel and his wound, but David feigns innocence. David apologizes and promises not to get high again. Later, Siggy invites David to his house. When David refuses a drink, Siggy yells at him to relax. He assures David that his walls are soundproof. Siggy then tells him that he also used the door at the tunnel to correct his life. He was in prison for committing many minor crimes, and when he was granted parole, he went into the tunnel and discovered this world, which was 5 years in the past. Now he's living off placing bets on sports games since he already knew the outcome. He's also killed his past self, claiming that it's the price they pay for another chance. Siggy reveals that there's more of them who've come from the future, and he buried those who tried to reveal their secret in the same woods where Max is now. Heavy with thought, David returns home and locks the door, afraid of what Siggy might do. David overhears that Leonie will be having dinner at Suzanne's house, so he asks Suzanne to call him when Leonie is ready to come home. Before going inside their home, Maya notices the odd couple on the road again. She follows them to Suzanne's house. Suzanne and Paul are cooking in the kitchen as the other couple enter, holding a knife. Maya walks by just in time to see Paul and Suzanne getting killed by their future selves. Maya takes the girls and runs. The future Paul chases after them, but Maya reaches her house before he can cross the street. Maya is hysterical as she explains that Suzanne and Paul are dead. She hurries to call the police and explains to David how their killers look like Suzanne and Paul. David hesitates, then asks Maya not to call the police. Maya demands that he tell the truth about the tunnel, but he can't. Later, the police arrive with the new Suzanne and Paul to collect their daughter. Nellie recognizes that something's different with their parents, and Maya tries to take her away from them. The police restrain Maya as she begs them not to let the girl go with the couple. David hugs his wife to calm her down. She then collects Leonie and rushes upstairs. The police advise David to watch over his wife before leaving. After the police are gone, David receives a phone call from Maya, but her tone is different. He looks around and sees Maya from his timeline in Siggy's house. There, the future Maya claims that she also wants to be with Leonie, who's alive in this timeline. She promises that they can make a fresh start if he lets her. Meanwhile, Maya quietly heads downstairs with Leonie, making sure that David is not around. Leonie assures her mother that Nellie is with her better parents now, revealing that David was also replaced with a better one. At Siggy's house, the future Maya is doubtful about hurting her past self. David tries to convince her not to do it, but she asserts that she needs to be with her daughter. To spare her, David volunteers to do it instead. Siggy hands him a gun and gives him only 5 minutes to do the job. David goes across the street and meets the future Gia, who promises that she's changed and wants what's best for David and Leonie. He ignores her and hurries back home, spotting the police still keeping watch of them. When he gets home, Maya and Leonie are nowhere. Suddenly, Maya hits him in the face, so he aims his gun at her. He warns her that she'll be killed and Leonie will be taken away. David sets the gun down and tells her to go to the other side of the tunnel to escape. Later, David helps prepare Leonie to escape with Maya. When Leonie asks if he'll go with them, David hugs her in response. Meanwhile, the future Maya and Siggy wait outside, and Siggy concludes that David couldn't do it. Siggy heads to the house with a gun, and the future Maya follows. Back at the house, David rides his van with the windows blacked out and a gun ready at his side. He speeds past the police and Siggy. All the neighbors who went through the tunnel try to stop him, and David soon crashes the van. While everyone's distracted, Maya and Leonie make a run for it, but Leonie trips. The future Maya grabs Leonie, and the two mothers come face to face. When the neighbors realize that David is alone in the car, the future Maya mournfully lets her past self escape with Leonie to ensure her child's safety. Siggy starts firing at the two, and David drives to stop him. The future Maya tackles Siggy, but he easily pushes her off. Siggy then sees David speeding towards him, so he jumps onto the hood and chokes David. Maya and Leonie reach the tunnel, and Maya stops to see David's sacrifice for them. As soon as they enter, David crashes the van into the tunnel, making it collapse. David survives the crash. He climbs out of the van, and the future Maya heads to the pool. David joins her as the couple faces another world where their daughter is gone.
This is all for Story Recap for today. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Tell us in the comments if you want us to recap your favorite movie. Watch other of our videos showing on the screen and leave a like because it helps the channel. And I would see you in the next video. Goodbye.